Welcome. The moment I saw that text, my stomach sank. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't the type to snoop, but her phone was there, lighting up on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. Normally, I'd have ignored it, let her pick it up. Later this time, something stopped me, a hunch, a feeling I couldn't shake. My hands were steady when I picked it up, but my chest felt tight. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, didn't want to be that paranoid husband who reads into every little thing. But the words on the screen froze me in place. The message read, "I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was amazing." I blinked as if the letters might rearrange themselves, revealing a harmless joke or a misunderstanding. They didn't. My breath caught in my throat, and I placed the phone back where I found it, almost as if it burned my fingers. I could hear the shower running down the hall, water splashing against the tiles. I stood there, rooted to the spot, waiting for her to come back. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure she'd hear it when she returned. When she emerged wrapped in a towel, her face lit up with a smile. "Hey," she said casually, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I couldn't bring myself to ask about the text. Right then, not while. The words still felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I forced a smile, kissed her cheek, and told her I was heading out to grab groceries. She didn't ask any questions, didn't seem to notice the tension in my voice. I slipped out the door, my mind spinning. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel tightly, staring at the dashboard. The person I'd built my life with, the woman I trusted more than anyone, was hiding something. It wasn't just the text. There had been other signs. Hadn't there? The late nights, the new perfume. She hadn't mentioned the way she always seemed to have her phone close by, even during dinner. I told myself those were just coincidences. Now they painted a very different picture. I didn't go to the grocery store. Instead, I parked at the nearby park, rolling down the windows to let in the crisp autumn air I needed. To think, what was I going to do? Confront the right away, risk a blow-up argument, or dig a little deeper to make sure I wasn't overreacting? I wasn't ready to accuse her outright. I needed to know for sure before I could face her over. The next few days I kept my eyes open. I watched her closely, how she smiled when her phone buzzed, how she slipped out of the room to take calls, how she avoided my eyes when I asked her about her schedule. It was subtle, but once I noticed, it was impossible to ignore. She'd become a stranger to me, the distance between us growing with each passing moment. I wanted to grab her shoulders, shake her, and demand the truth, but I held back, gathering small pieces of evidence. Like a detective working a case one evening, she said she was meeting friends for dinner. That wasn't unusual. She'd always been social, but this time I checked her location through the tracking app we both agreed to use after our son got his first smartphone. It wasn't something I'd ever felt the need to do before. Her phone pinged at a restaurant on the other side of town. It wasn't the one she usually went to, and the name didn't match the group of friends she'd mentioned. I felt a pit in my stomach. I stared at the dot on the map, watching it stay in place for hours. When she came home later that night, she was cheerful, laughing about something Beth had said. I forced myself to act normal, but my mind was racing. Who was she really meeting? What was she hiding? The next day, I called her work. While she was out, I pretended I needed to confirm her hours for something, an insurance form or a delivery schedule. The receptionist hesitated before saying, "She's been leaving early some days. I'm not sure what you need, but I can have her call you back." I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking. She'd been leaving work early for what? I felt my throat tighten. The reality of her deception closing in on me. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't a one-time thing. She had a pattern, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I confronted her that night. I laid out everything, the text, the unusual locations, the early exits from work. Her face went pale, her mouth opening and closing as she searched forwards. She started with denials, then shifted to excuses. It was work-related, it was a friend going through a rough time. It was anything but what I already knew. In my heart, it was stop. I said, my voice firm. I've seen enough. Just tell me the truth." She froze, tears welling in here, because I thought I'd feel triumphant, seeing her cornered. But all I felt was sorrow. I had loved this woman. I had shared my life, my dreams, my family with her. And now watching her crumble under the weight of her own lies, I felt jealous of what we once had more keenly than ever. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for it to happen." I stared at her, the person I thought I knew so well. She looked like a stranger now. "You destroyed us," I said, my voice heavy. "You didn't just hurt me. You tore apart everything we built, everything we were." Her tears fell freely, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I couldn't be the person who made her feel better after what she'd done. Instead, I stood and left the room. It needed space. I needed to breathe. As I walked outside into the cool night air, I realized that the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, was gone. I couldn't see a way forward, not yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this break me. Not completely. I would find a way to rebuild my life. Piece by painful piece, the days after her confession were a blur. I felt like a stranger. In my own home, every corner of the house seemed to echo with memories that now felt hollow. Our wedding photos on the mantel, the little marks on the kitchen wall where we'd measured our son's height. Each year, the souvenirs from family vacations all. Off it felt tainted, overshadowed by the weight of her betrayal. She tried to talk to me to explain it was a mistake. She said more than once I didn't mean for it to go this far, but her words felt empty. The trust that had taken years to build was gone. I couldn't unsee the message, couldn't unhear the lies, couldn't ignore the way she looked at me when she admitted it was true. Even her apologies felt like another layer of manipulation, a way to shift the blame to make me feel guilty for being angry. I refused to let her rewrite what had happened. She had made her choice, and I had to make mine for a while. I didn't know what that choice would be. I slept on the couch, avoiding her as much as possible. I thought about leaving, about packing my things and starting over somewhere else. But this was my home in my life. I wasn't going to let her push me out. I wasn't going to let her take everything. Instead, I took small steps to reclaim my sense of control. I reached out to close friends ones I knew I could trust. I told them what had happened, not a gossip, but because I needed support. Their kindness was a lifeline. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I deserved better than what she had given me. I started counseling, a step I had always thought I'd never need talking to. Someone who wasn't part of our circle, someone who could help me make sense of the betrayal, gave me clarity I hadn't thought possible. I realized that staying quiet, bottling everything up, was only hurting me more. Meanwhile, she grew more desperate. She offered to go to therapy, to change jobs, to delete all her social media accounts, anything she thought might win me back. But each gesture felt calculated, as if she were checking off boxes on a list of things she thought I wanted. I didn't want her to make promises she wouldn't keep. I wanted her to understand what she'd done, to acknowledge the pain she'd caused, to accept that our marriage would never be the same. The turning point came one morning. As I was sitting at the kitchen table, I'd been up all night thinking about what I wanted for my future. Our son had just left for school, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders as he ran out the door, watching him. I realized what was most important. Couldn't let this situation define his childhood. He deserved stability, love, and a father who could be fully present for him. I didn't want him growing up in a house filled with tension and resentment. I wanted him to know what a healthy relationship looked like, even if that meant starting over without his mother. In the picture, that realization gave me the strength to move forward. It told her it was over. No more discussions, no more empty apologies. We needed to separate. At first, she argued, begged, cried, but eventually she understood that I wasn't going to change my mind. I contacted a lawyer, started the divorce process, and began setting up a new life for myself and my son. It wasn't easy untangling our lives after so many years. Together felt like dismantling a house, brick by brick. But with each step, I felt a little lighter, a little more sure of my decision. I took time to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in years. I joined a local gym, started reading, again, reconnected with old friends. I discovered hobbies I didn't know I loved, woodworking, photography, hiking. Each new experience felt like a piece of myself. I was rediscovering a reminder that I was more than just a husband and a father. I was a person who deserved happiness, peace, and fulfillment. I also focused on building a stronger relationship with my son. We spent weekends exploring nature trails, playing board games, baking cookies in the kitchen. I wanted him to see that, even though our family was different now, we could still have joy, laughter, and love. He had questions. Of course, he asked why his mom and I weren't together anymore, and I did my best to answer in a way he could understand honestly, but without blaming her. I didn't want him to carry the burden of our problems. My goal was to give him a foundation of love and security, even if it looked different than before. In time, I found myself healing. The anger and sadness that had consumed me started to fade. I still had moments of bitterness, flashes of what could have been. But those moments didn't define me anymore. I learned to let go of the pain, not for her, but for me. Holding on to it wouldn't change the past, and it wouldn't help me build the future I wanted. Years later, I looked back on that period of my life with a sense of peace. I didn't forgive her, not completely, but I didn't let her actions control me anymore. I had rebuilt my life, brick by brick, into something stronger, something that belonged entirely to me and my son. I had found happiness again, not in someone else, but in myself, in the freedom to be who I was, unburdened by lies. She had destroyed our family, but she hadn't destroyed me. I had rebuilt, I had healed, and I had moved forward. And in doing so, I discovered a strength I never knew I had.